Welcome to the Matt Report, the #1 WordPress business podcast. This isn't geek speak. It's about the journey of success and failure as a WordPress entrepreneur. Get ready. You're just an episode away from your next aha experience or big idea. And now your host, Matt.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Matt Report. Awesome episode as always today with Andrew Norcross of Reactive Studios, here to teach us what it's like to be a professional WordPress developer, especially if you're somebody who's just getting into WordPress development. How do you find this WordPress community, right? How do you fit in? Where do you connect with other people? How do you connect with agencies? How do you find clients? So he's going to share some tips and some tricks on how to do that. And then we're going to dive into his newly launched business, selling a premium plugin, and sort of his biggest obstacles and how he went about it, what's working for him now. So it's a great lesson for anybody who's getting into that arena as well. You don't have to be a developer to sort of hear this kind of talk. It's all very sort of marketing and the challenges that he faces, right? So it'll be a good lesson there. Other news around the Matt Report, as always, loving all the iTunes reviews. Keep them coming. It really helps, really validates what I'm doing. So thanks for that. Over at the mentor site, wpmentor.org, that's still cranking away, almost 60 mentorships listed now. So if you're looking to get involved as a mentor or you're somebody who needs some help with that, head on over to the mentor site, wpmentor.org. Try your hand at that. If you're somebody who's looking for WordPress help for your WordPress website, or you're a consultant and you're looking to kind of get rid of the support end of your business, we just launched our own support site over at embracewp.com. And something that we've always done with our clients is supporting our clients after we do a web design or WordPress design for them. So now we've just kind of packaged it up, put it out on the web for folks to consume. So if you're looking for any of that kind of help or know someone who is, embracewp.com. Really appreciate that. So lots of new stuff buzzing around the WordPress world these days, and a lot of it has to do with that pricing a product. And recently I wrote about that over on Matt Report about that topic and what it's like to price these types of plugins and not doing that unlimited, give you everything for $50. Andrew, our guest today, we're going to get into why he decided to go with the pricing he did, because I mentioned to him that some of this pricing, you can get away with his plugin 50 sites for $150. That's real small stuff if you think about how many sites how much you're selling for each individual site, right? So if you sold 50 sites, and even if you couldn't get past the $500 client per site, that's some serious money and a small investment on his end to help customize these sites for his plugin. He should be getting a lot more. So it's definitely an interesting talk. I'd love to hear your feedback about pricing. If you have a plugin that you are pricing or have priced, you're doing really well with it, shoot me an email, mattreportblog@gmail.com. I'd love to kind of work in these different stories of pricing into a special blog post so we can share sort of your thoughts with the world and how you price your products. Without further ado, on to the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Matt Report. Usually this thing dings, so I know when I'm going live, but it didn't do it this time. Happy to be here. Happy to have Andrew Norcross on the show today, Reactive Studios and Genesis Design Palette Pro. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, if you haven't been watching the show, where the heck have you been? #1 WordPress business podcast in the entire universe. So that's pretty awesome. That's official, by the way. MattReport.com, MattReport.com/subscribe to join the mailing list. Today, we invited Andrew on to talk about what it's like to be a professional WordPress developer, sort of transitioning now into, or maybe we're transitioning, we're going to hear about that, about plugin development, selling a plugin, marketing a plugin, supporting a plugin, thinking about the future of a plugin, all of these things that is going through his mind, all the while balancing the studio and agency life. So Andrew, for folks who don't know you, who are you and what do you do?
Well, as you said, my name is Andrew Norcross. I run Reactive Studios with the help of my wife and a few other folks. I've been working with WordPress in some manners for coming on 7 years now. I did not have a programming background or anything of that nature. I actually was in banking and finance for about 10 years. I went from being an accountant and doing basically glorified data entry up through when I left that career path. I was a Series 7 licensed investment advisor, and in particular I managed fiduciary assets held in trust, which basically meant I managed money for dead people. And I decided that I just didn't want to do anything in that line of work ever again. I had started doing a little bit of WordPress stuff here and there back when I built a server and I needed to put something on that server. So I built my brother a website. He has a window tinting business, and I built one or two others. Very basic HTML, I mean, nothing, no database whatsoever. And then I started I'm like, oh, well, I should have a blog, because I'd had them in random spots before, like Blogger, LiveJournal, and all those other places. Not that I ever write, really, because it's very, very rare that I actually write anything down. But so I went ahead and initially I got movable type working because it was easier to get set up at the time, and I just couldn't stand the templating language. It just didn't make any sense to me. I hated having to make all these little changes everywhere, and I finally was able to get WordPress working on the server, and I had a friend who ran a small site in WordPress, and he needed to get new hosting, so I put it on my box, and everything else kind of rolled out from there. I did not intend on this even being a career. At one point, I left the finance world. I was going back to school full time to get around to finally finishing my degree. And over the course of a few months, I had some stuff happen in my personal life that required me to have some sort of full-time employment. And by that point, the amount of work that I had coming in was enough to sustain that. And so I just kept going with it because I didn't know what else to do. It was there, and I figured it was worth giving it a shot. I was 26 or 27 at the time, and from there it's grown. I don't think I've ever had a down year, right, in one way or the other. I've over the course of this, I've worked for myself as a solo or solopreneur or whatever the buzzword is. Basically just flat out freelancing. I've done work for larger agencies. For about a year and a half combined, I worked for 2 separate marketing firms full time, and managed the company on the side. Mm-hmm. And back in June, July of last year, decided to, at the time I was 32 years old, and I'm looking at it like, if there's a time to do it, now is it. And so we went back to relaunching the company full-time, rebranded it, built a new site. My wife took over the project management, which actually allowed me to just write code and to do what I'm good at. And with that, we're able to actually manage projects better, was able to take on larger clients that needed a little more hand-holding that I wasn't able to do because I couldn't do that and actually do the development work. And it's grown, quite a bit. I started writing plugins pretty early on just to do it, and slowly have been moving into the commercial side of plugins, and that's where we are now.
Nice. So there's a lot of stuff that's happened in this span of what sounds like almost a decade of doing this. You're not the only one that's come from the financial market. The names are escaping me right now, but I've heard this before, that a lot of folks are come from the finance side. I don't want to explore that, but it'd be interesting to kind of figure out why people run from that to WordPress. But your story sounds like a lot of folks in the audience who are they're either still working a full-time job and they're looking to get out of it, and WordPress seems to be the tool that they're going to use to catapult themselves into some new market. Does Andrew have a 3-step process of what it was like to get out of the real day job into freelancing? Or was it just a combination snowball effect that kind of just happened?
Some of it was certainly a snowball effect because I did not have any idea that this was going to grow into what it did. Had I done that, maybe it would have planned differently. But what I just started doing the work, and for a while, what I would actually do is I kept the phrase WordPress help in a column on TweetDeck as a search term, and I would look for people that were having problems, and I would respond. And sometimes it would be a simple one line, I could answer the question in 140 characters, or I could point them to a plugin that solved what they were looking for, or sometimes it would actually need some help. And a few of those turned into actual clients. One or two of them are still my clients now, and most of them, budget-wise or other way, or they were one-offs, just needed something to do. And that combined with I just started digging into as much as I could from a resource perspective. I would look at what other sites were doing. I'd look at what other developers were doing. I would try to mimic what I saw on other sites. I would look for as many chunks of code as I could find, and I would just keep pushing. I didn't sleep much at all. People would make jokes that they thought I had one of those auto tweeting things because they would see me tweet at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and then they'd see me tweet at like 6:30. Yeah. And I was like, no, that was me both times. I got 2.5 hours of sleep. Yeah. That's subsided, but it's kind of where I went with that.
You said something pretty interesting, and actually comes up very often when we're doing some like consulting stuff with other people starting their WordPress business. Is you do work freelance, you do work with your own clients, but then you'll work with an agency. Some folks work with other PR firms or something like that as like their back office. That's one strategy for folks who are just jumping into this, where they're sort of like, what do I focus on? Like, do I set up a TweetDeck column that finds people looking for help? Do I just try to knock on doors and sell websites, or do I partner up with another agency? Looking back at where you're at now and what you were doing back then, is there a particular avenue you'd rather go down in terms of growth and at least finding yourself?
Doing that. That search column thing, what I didn't realize at the time, but what it exposed me to was so many different scenarios that I would have never encountered had I been building something from start to finish. They were these weird plugin combinations. They were these themes that I've never heard of, whether they were custom built or some theme shop that I've just never seen. They were any number of things. And usually there was a problem. So that meant not only did I have to dig into and find out what the current state of the site was and do it quickly, but then I had to fix it, and that really bumped up my ability to kind of weed through all the different parts of what WordPress is doing, both from from an actual code perspective, but then what users were doing. What were they doing with it? What were they trying to bend it into for them? And I was able to find these scenarios that, a bunch of them I've still never encountered building my own thing, ever. So, that gave me the ability to when something didn't work or when something went wrong, I knew a good place to start.
Do you have looking back at it now, would you say that you'd prefer working with that one-on-one client? I mean, I know that's what you're doing now, but thinking of yourself as growing, did that make more sense, or would it make more sense to partner up with an agency? To kind of figure your way out, especially with figuring out WordPress?
I'm not sure how you'd be able to get in with an agency without having done the individual client stuff first.
Okay.
Simply because it's very hard to build that skill set in a vacuum. You can build stuff all day long, but until it's actually being used and it's being, basically stress tested by actual, regular users, it's very hard to get that skill set to a point where an agency would find value. In my experience.
Yeah. What was that aha moment where you said, and I know you said you helped a friend build a site, but what was your first major, quote unquote, major project like? And when did you say, you know what, I can definitely turn this into a career? Do you remember that project and how that went?
Gosh, I would probably think for a second. It was a while ago, but there was about 2 or 3 sites that were that I was working on at the same time, and one of them was just it was an old Kubrick build that did not even change the name of the folder. I mean, just about every bad practice that could happen was going on at the same time, and going through that, I told him, I was like, "This, you can probably fix this, but it's going to take longer, and there's no guarantee because it's so outdated." And I forget whatever analogy I used for the guy, but I told him, I was like, "It's probably going to be cheaper to just rebuild this and do it the right way." And at the time, I wasn't 100% sure I could rebuild it, but I sold it to him anyway. And then I realized, I'm like, okay, now I have to make sure I know how to rebuild this. So I did.
Nice. Now, were you doing this all remote? This is still like somebody coming from Twitter, or is this somebody you were meeting with, like shaking hands with?
These were all remote. I met with I would meet with a few local clients, but a lot of times I had less success with local clients because they wanted more of my time. They wanted me to come to their office once a week or or they felt that they wanted me to keep a 9 to 5 schedule with them, and at the time my life didn't jive with that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting scenario because that's how a lot of folks just starting out. I mean, I go to WordCamps and talk to people who are doing that, and they're saying, hey, it's great business because I can go and I can meet them and I can see where they work and all this stuff. But then eventually, they want you to come to the office to show them how to use WordPress, or they got a new product in and they want you to come and take like the pictures for it. It's like no, I'm developing you the WordPress site. You have to bring those assets to the table. Any advice for folks who are looking to just say no to that kind of thing, or any advice towards the people who are just working online? Is there anything that they can do to start finding these leads that are out there today to work remotely?
As far my own experience is, a lot of that is just simply coming word of mouth.
Yeah.
And I know that it was the case then, and it's certainly the case now. Is there's a lot of work to be had, and there's a lot of stuff that comes across my plate that, for one reason or another, either the budget may be a little too low, or the timeline doesn't fit with the other projects I have on schedule, that I can't take it. And from time to time, it's been a struggle to find other folks that I know and that I trust well enough to, at least refer to. Most of the, if someone's trying to get that moving, I mean, that would be the first thing I would do, is just say, make yourself known to other folks in the community, and they will give you the work if you show that you can do it. Yeah.
Best place for developers to get known today. Is it WordCamps? Is it .org? Is .org too saturated now? Developer comes to you and says, "Hey, Andrew, how do I get noticed? Where do you think they should go?"
First part, I mean, Twitter. As much as it, at times pains me to say that, a lot of, most of us are working from home. We're working remote, and that's the one. I know there's the WP Water Cooler podcast, but that's kind of the one place that a lot of us will spend time. Now, I don't keep that up nearly as much as I used to, just because it can be distracting. But it's a good place to see, who's talking to who, what are they working on, because they'll mention it. You'll see one person ask a question, somebody else answer it. It's not an invitation to immediately barge into everybody's conversation. And at times, depending on the tone of the conversation, it's probably best to stay out of it. But more often than not, you look at it and be like, okay, this is, you get to see the people who are around, and from there, I mean, I've never got a client off a job board or a freelancer's list or anything like that. So I have no idea if those things are work. I've never used them. I've never had to. So I have no experience one way or the other. I know some folks that stuff works well for them. Other people, they don't like the clients because it's, seems to be, lower tier financially. But my own experience has been, the work has always come to me. I've rarely had to go out and look for leads.
Yeah. I recently received an email from a gentleman out in the UK who's, just launching his business in the WordPress world. And he asked about that $500 client and scaling up from there. And, he was thinking about doing pro bono work, right, for either nonprofits or something like that, so that he could kind of build up his portfolio. And I said, yeah, I mean, that's a great stepping stone, and as long as it can be managed well, and you really have nothing right now to bring in leads, I can see that happening as long as you ask these folks that, hey, at least give me a few leads or a few referrals, write up a good recommendation for me, showcase this as a case study or something like that. Have you ever done any kind of pro bono work when you started out? Do you think that's a good way to kind of get your foot out there?
I did one. I think I've done maybe one or two, but they were for organizations or causes that I agreed with and felt that it was worth doing. It was in no way for anything back. The one I remember, this was a couple of years ago when that flood in Haiti. I helped build a site for an organization that was doing some charity work for that, and I did that because I felt that they were doing something good and I wanted to help. And I felt that I could write them a check for a couple $100, or I could build them something that would help bring in potentially thousands. So that was in my way of contributing. Pro bono work, if you want to do it, great. But my own experience has been I don't give anything away expecting something back. If I'm going to give it away, give it away. The whole point of scaling up from $500 clients is that you've got to have the $500 clients first. They're going to exist. They're always going to exist. Nobody wants them, but there's a lot to be learned from them.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely, if you're looking at it as a learning experience, as a small paid learning experience, I guess that's definitely a strong thing, because then you get to kind of test the market and see what works. And as long as you're not trying to build them a Facebook for $500, you're fairly safe. Let's talk about this transition into now getting into the product space, now getting into a premium plugin space. You've done plugins in the past. You have a bunch. A few of them that I use specifically would be the System Reporter, the one that gives you the outline of what's going on in your WordPress site. Why this new product, and how did that come to fruition?
So, well, I think at this point I have 25 or 26 plugins in the repository, combined with a bunch of stuff on GitHub. And some of it's done, some of it's close to done. The stuff in GitHub tends to be a little more, specialized to what I wanted it to do, and it might not be really useful for a whole lot of other people. But I put it there, if in case it is. I got to a point where I could not support. I did not simply have the time to support the free plugins I had, and as much as I wanted to, I was trying to. I'd look in there and realize I hadn't checked in a month, and that's not what I wanted to be able to do. But that I was stuck. I actually went and had I had a couple of them taken out because I hadn't touched them in 2-3 years. I wasn't going to touch them. They fit a need at the time. They just don't anymore. And I realized that I like building plugins, but if I'm not going to support them, I'm not going to build them because everyone gets angry. So I realized that I should probably charge for them. I thought that my ability had gotten to the point where I could justify charging for it. Some of the early plugins I built, but if I had paid for it and then looked at the code, I would be very angry. Whereas the stuff now, I'm like, I think it's built very well, and it fits a need. And then I know how to support it. I know how to document it. I know how to make it extendable. Whereas I didn't know how to do that stuff early on.
Yeah. If WordPress is a funny place, and I'm not a developer. What I do is I really consult with these clients, and I help them make the right choice and pick the right technology to use. But your thoughts as a developer, I mean, you might come up with this idea, and let's say you write a plugin in a weekend. You might know that you took some shortcuts, but to the end user, as long as it works for them, for the average Joe of WordPress, how much do you care about going back to rewrite that to maybe not, from 500 lines of code to 450 lines of code? What's the big deal, right, as some might say? How important is that to you?
I usually don't release it until those shortcuts are gone. And the reason for that is, again, nothing's in a vacuum. Yeah, it might work if that's the only thing you're running. But that's not going to be the only thing they're running. And I would rather, spend the extra day, maybe, to do it right, because I've done that. I built the plugin in a weekend, the backstretch plugin that I've got out. And then I took another day and a half to go back through, make sure that, I added some filters to allow people to change things that I didn't want to build a huge settings panel. I went through, made sure everything was clean, and then I ran it on a couple test environments just to make sure that everything was good. And it took another day or so. And it wasn't even like a full 10-hour day of coding. It was in between doing other stuff. Mm-hmm. So, and half of that was writing documentation. So I don't see the benefit of releasing something. I know that the whole startup culture, the minimum viable product, is a big deal, and that's great. But frankly, I don't think a plugin or a piece of software that is not finished meets that minimum requirement. If it's something that is not done properly, then frankly it's not minimum, and right. It's going to cause more problems.
Right. And you took the words right out of my mouth. That's where I was going with it. MVP and your product today. How long did it take you to sort of plan out and launch your first version of Design Palette Pro?
I had built a version of it about two and a half years ago.
Wow.
For a previous version, Genesis. It was something, I was working for a marketing firm at the time, and I was building them an internal child theme for internal projects. So I built out this kind of settings page, styling page, just so they could, whomever was using it could do those things without me having to do it, but also just so it would be easy to roll this stuff out. And I baked it into the child theme, and it was very much something that was tailored to that. But I realized that it was probably useful for other folks. So I took it and I extracted it out, I cleaned it up, I made it a little more general in nature and released it, and folks liked it. Now again, this is one of those things that it wasn't extendable. It only worked with Genesis flat. It didn't work with any child themes. It had other limitations. There was no way to filter font lists or add settings, or it was all just there. So I had on my list for, I have a long list of stuff that I would like to build at some point if the time ever made itself available. And that was on there for knowing that Genesis 2.0 was coming. That was one of the things that I wanted to do. And I decided maybe about 3 months ago, maybe a little bit more, to start planning that out, because it was out, it had been out for a little bit. They were rolling out the 2.0 child themes. So, I first looked at the mistakes that I made with the first one, and that's kind of where I started. And then I started to flesh out, I actually tried to flesh out the UI a little bit first, because I'm not a UI person, I'm not good at that. And knowing what I wanted to accomplish, I then try to get a very, very rough idea of where things would go and how things would flow. And then from there I started just building out and building out. And every step along the way, whenever I had to make a decision about something, I would try to add a hook or a filter onto it, and then I would insert my decision, but I would make it to where, yeah, if someone else wants to change it, they're more than happy to do it.
Mm. You bring up an interesting point about being a developer, not being a sort of UI person. If you could have, would you have worked with somebody, and not saying that the UI of the plugin is complicated or not properly working, but would you have liked to partner with somebody, if you had seed investment or an angel investment in something like this? Would you have done something like that, or would you say, you know what, I want to stick as the solopreneur and do this all myself?
Oh yeah, if I would have had the budget and time to pay an actual UX UI person, and I know that usually sometimes those are two different people, but someone who has actually building user interfaces as a skill set, I would have done it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Part of the problem was the feature set was evolving as I was building it. I would build out one part and realized I need to do something over here for this to match up. So it would have been a little bit difficult to have somebody do that before I had finished out. So it was kind of a moving target. If there were someone else on my team who that's all they did, then it would have been a different story.
For a real short synopsis of this plugin, what we're doing here is we're installing this plugin. It's allowing people that run StudioPress and specific child themes right now to sort of customize the front end of the site, be it colors, font sizes, that kind of thing, and a whole slew of other style options. This is a lot, right? This plugin does a lot.
Yeah, it does. As you said, the core version of the plugin is tied to Genesis itself, and it preloads with all of the defaults that are in Genesis itself, all the colors and spacing and things of that nature, and then it allows you to go through and make those various styles based on what you want. It's got a live preview, so as you're making changes on the left, you see it on the right. It lets you, I've got 2 add-ons for free that are out in the repository. One hooks in about 30 of the most popular Google fonts, and another one gives you a little box where you can actually enter freeform CSS if, for some reason, there's some weird one-off thing that you just want to drop in there. And then there are add-ons for particular child themes, which will, it'll swap out the defaults to match that particular child theme, and it will remove any settings that aren't relevant to that, and it will add new ones for anything unique to that child theme.
One of the things that I'm interested in hearing, and you may have not received this feedback yet, but from the common Joe who buys this plugin, let's say he or she buys the basic plan, starts going in and starts customizing it, and they make a site that they don't like, right? They design, mixes of colors and font sizes, and it just looks hideous. And they turn to you and they say, "Yeah, this plugin doesn't work. Look at how terrible my site looks." I was like, "Well, it's your fault." How do you go? Have you experienced this yet? How do you go about supporting somebody who's very new to this type of interaction?
Well, I mean, the goal of the plugin was to kind of fill that gap between folks who are completely happy with one off the shelf and someone who is going to hire a developer or a designer. And I thought that gap was pretty wide. And they didn't want to make their own child theme. They didn't know how. They didn't feel comfortable doing it. So, and especially if they're already using a child theme, there's no grandchild themes. So, I mean, if they could MySpace it up. There's nothing preventing them from doing that. I don't include Comic Sans in the font choices. I mean, I did make that executive decision, but otherwise, no one has come back and said, this doesn't make me a better designer.
Right.
If they did, I probably would say it doesn't make me one either. This doesn't replace skill. This replaces, the ability to do so programmatically. And I tell them that then you should probably hire a designer.
Right. You came up. I wrote an article about after reading Chris Lemon's book, pricing, and looking at a few other product launches that came out. You came out with three, excuse me, pricing plans: $39, $69, and $149. And when I did the math, it was like $3 or something like $1 something a site. How did you come up with pricing for $149 for 50 licenses?
Well, I knew that I did not want to do an unlimited option, which on some other stuff that I released, I do have that ability because they're smaller scope items. What I wanted to avoid with this in particular was the consultants of the world, buying it, throwing a coat of paint on it, installing it, and then disappearing. And then the support comes back to me. And I could see that becoming big, quickly. And that's what I wanted to avoid. So, and also from the whole Woo fiasco, I knew that, if it's 50 right now, if I decided to bump it up to 100 or decided to drop it to 40, most people probably wouldn't even be affected, but they wouldn't be happy necessarily if I lowered the number of licenses. Not that I have any intent to, but it's justifiable. I could understand. I could explain my reason. If I went from unlimited to anything else, I've now changed the nature of the agreement, and now people are going to be that much more upset, even if they didn't, even if they used it twice. They're still like, you said I have unlimited, now I don't have unlimited. Even if I gave them a number that they couldn't possibly reach, it doesn't matter. Psychologically, I've now told them they have a limitation that they didn't have before.
Right.
So 50 seemed like a high number that folks would be, if you're using this on more than 50 sites, I keep an eye on folks that are using it from an activation standpoint. If I see someone that's getting close to 50, I'll probably reach out to them and see what's going on. Are they just not deactivating development sites? Are they, is there something wrong on my end that it's like double counting something? Or maybe they need something, beyond that. But I can address those on a case-by-case basis.
Right, and that's a good thing, because what that'll do is open up an opportunity for you to, not necessarily somebody abusing it, but somebody you could reach out to and say, hey, if you're going to hit 50, chances are you probably somewhere in those 50 sites, there's probably something you're actually looking for extra that the plugin might not solve right now, but you'd happily work with them to build out some new feature or function that would work. Because if they're doing 50 sites, they're probably a good sized consultant, right?
Yeah.
Or some kind of agency or something of the sorts that's kind of helping out many domains, which would be awesome for you. So what's next? I see that you're gonna connect with other themes. Is that sort of the plan right now, to kind of go through all StudioPress's 3 million themes and get it compatible with that?
Well, I'm
for
only
free. Damn you, for free.
Well, the add-ons, the way it's set up, the child theme add-ons are not free. But they're not expensive. I think I've got them at $10 or $15. Off the top of my head, I don't remember. Pricing obviously being something fluid because it's still new. The fact that there are 2 add-ons done now with a third one, getting close, is much different than when I have 15 done. So I'm going to be mindful of how to package things and how to bundle things once there are more things. Once I have more add-ons out there, but initially, yes, to roll through and start, and to get these done for the 2.0 child themes. The pre-2.0 stuff I'm not touching because the markup is completely different. It would basically involve writing a new plugin, and I'm not going to do it.
Right.
From there, I'm looking at other add-ons. For example, gravity forms. So something pointed so you can style gravity forms, maybe BBPress or EDD or something like that. Some of the popular stuff out there.
Tremendous. Looking back before you got on this journey of going into a premium plugin like this, is there anything you would have changed along the way or done slightly different before launching it to the world?
I probably would have saved up a little bit of money so I did not have to do any client work for the week before and the 2 or like a week after, for a length of time before, during, and after launch, because that was the most, there's all the little things about launching it that, even though I'd done it before, this was on a much different scale. And it was, getting the plugin done, I was pretty much done. I'm like, all right, great, now I have to actually build the site to sell it, and then I have to make sure all the payment stuff is set up and configured, and all the licensing is set up, and all the all the stuff that had nothing to do with the actual plugin.
Right.
And stuff that while I had budgeted time for it, I did not in any remotely do it well.
Yeah.
So I was
Is there one thing that derailed this launch or project that you would tell somebody definitely focus on this before you make a launch?
Well, when I was about 90% of the way done with the plugin, I realized that I had been doing one part of it in a very inefficient and frankly stupid way. It worked, and that's like one of those shortcuts. Yeah, it worked, but I knew that if I had actually launched with that, it would have been harder to back out of, and essentially I would have been stuck having to somehow or another support that method of doing something a particular way, just to keep backwards, or otherwise anything that would have been built on top of it would have broken. So I'm like, it ended up being delayed about 2 weeks because I had to go back and refactor about 50% of the plugin, at least, maybe more. But when I was done with it, it was a lot more solid. It was a lot easier to extend. It was a lot easier to explain how to extend, which was big for me. And I made it in such a way that I knew that it was solid. I was comfortable. If anyone would have asked why I was doing something, I was very comfortable in explaining why it was done a particular way.
Do you think that we get a little too the word is escaping me, but do you think we care too much about what our WordPress peers will say about our stuff versus what the actual market will say? Like I said before, like if you're selling it and it works and these people are happy with it, like the common person, your customer who's paying you, doesn't that weigh a little bit more to the positive side than if, Ryan Duff said, damn it, you didn't do this right?
Yes and no. I mean, am I going to listen to every bit of feedback from another WordPress developer? No, I'm not. There are some that just do, we all have our own habits and quirks and the way we do things. I mean, heck, go ask them which IDE is best.
Right. Yeah. God.
Done. And that's just writing the code. That's not anything about the actual code. Right. Combined with, things of that nature. But many times, customers are going to get recommendations from those WordPress peers. So yes, I want them to at least know that it's a quality, whether or not it fits the need is separate, but I want them to know that yes, it's quality and it's built well. And especially with this, with Design Palette in particular, I built it to be extendable. So I definitely want the code to be well because I'm expecting people to dig into it and build on top of it. And if the foundation isn't solid, that's just gonna, make me look bad, make the product look bad, and people won't build on it.
Right. What's the biggest challenge you're facing right now as you move ahead? Is it, is it going to be marketing? Is it going to be building out a new feature set?
Marketing, absolutely. I don't know how to market things. There's really no nice way to say that other than I don't know. Again, because I've never been a regular user of WordPress.
Yep.
My first experience was building something on it. So I've never looked at it from a regular user's point of view. They want to jump in, do what they want to do, and leave. They don't care what. You're right. They don't care what the code looks like. They're never going to look at it. I do. I always look at the source code. I always dig into that stuff. So, finding a way to make sure that what I'm presenting makes sense to a regular user. Not that they're. We like to say the word dumbed down, but they're not dumb. Right. They're just not developers, and there's a difference. Right. And showing them that yes, this solves your problem. They don't care about the feature. They want to know, are you solving my problem? Right. And showing them yes, this solves your problem, and I know it because of X.
Yeah. Many of them, would pay that $150 for one site, just to solve that problem. So it's definitely interesting, to see, where this goes, and I wish you all the best with this product. I think it's awesome. Something that you're definitely dipping into a great market of obviously studio press. There's a ton of folks there, which is no surprise. I think it's going to do great, and I think there's definitely a need out there. And you're right, partnering up with sort of the WordPress folks to give them the recommendation, or give their client the recommendation to use this, or on the flip side, training somebody who's just getting into WordPress development to use this product to launch studio press based sites is awesome stuff. That'll be the end of the formal interview. We're going to jump into the last few segments. First one, what's in your toolbox? Do you have a secret app or method that you use to get through your day? Some of us use Evernote, Sublime Text, Google Docs, but do you have one that's kind of rare that people might not know about that you use?
Well, I'm Sublime Text. I'm one of those few people that use Windows and don't care, and I'm perfectly okay with it. That being said, my next machine is probably going to be a Mac because I need the shell. That's why. Yeah. I'm not even happy that I'm going to be getting one. But my biggest toolbox. I use Asana for pretty much everything, and I built a small plugin that connects the Gravity forms that I have on my site. They automatically go into Asana as a new task, so I can start. I follow what I say. My wife follows up on the leads, and so we actually see them. So I don't have to go back and bury into my email looking for stuff.
Nice.
Beyond that is I have a comfortable mouse and desk. I'm sitting right now, but I have a standing desk, and I just keep. I don't try to keep anything in my head anymore. I used to do that for a long time, and it would constantly bite me because I forget things. And so I keep that sort of stuff. I keep folders for every project. I keep an actual text file with random notes and whatever the case may be on the computer, and I keep it active.
Nice. Listener question comes in from Travis Northcutt. How long until Daisy is trained to code?
I don't think the pig's going to be coding anytime soon. She's very beside the fact that she has hooves and can't actually press keys. I don't feel that she will. That's her. She likes to look good. I don't think she really cares about writing code.
And for those in the audience who don't know, you have a pet pig, right? Is that proper to say, a pet pig?
Yeah.
Is there a different word I should be using?
No, she's. We have 2 dogs and a pig.
Nice. We're going to jump into the lightning round. I'll ask you a series of quick questions, and you'll have a series of quick answers. The one plugin you cannot live without, besides your own?
Gravity Forms.
A favorite WordPress or business book?
Design is a Job.
A quote that you live or run your business by?
The world doesn't owe you anything.
Great. The best business or career advice you ever received?
Probably the same thing I just said before.
Yep. What's the longest a client project has ever taken?
2.5 years.
Nice. That must have been fun.
No, not at all.
If you had to switch to another CMS, what would it be?
I wouldn't.
And who should I interview next?
Pippin. Well, you probably already have.
Yeah, I already had Pippin. That's okay. Maybe we can get him back on again.
Or let's see, you've done Jared?
Yep.
Atkinson?
Oh, no, not yet. Nope.
Then I'd probably talk to him.
Nice. What's the one question that I didn't ask you that I should have?
I would probably say the biggest, my biggest mistakes in the commercial field.
Do you have one that you can name?
Yeah, and it was not doing enough research on the client side. The customer side for an actual use case. The very first commercial plugin I released, it's a ratings, does star ratings, and I spent a while building it. I knew that there wasn't much out there that did it well. There was one plugin that I won't name it because it's not important, but it's been out for a very long time. That's what most people use, but they didn't like it. Even as they were using it, they're like, I don't like this thing, but it's the only thing that does it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually look to see if enough people needed it to warrant building it, or at least spending the time building it the way I did. And the backstretch plugin that I made, that was the one that I made in a weekend. Then I spent another day and a half. That one has sold better, and it was and quicker. It in 2 weeks passed the 3.5 months of the previous.
Interesting.
So I realized it was, in my mind, it was like a dumb little thing, but that's my head as a developer, not as a user, saying, yes, I want this, and they were happy about it.
Yeah. Well, I think that, as you move forward and you're getting the revenue that you are getting in from selling the plugins, will kind of help reinvest in that and at least validate everything that you've done so far, which is going to be awesome. And I wish you the best success with that. Great interview, tons of advice for the beginner developer, tons of advice for how to transition into selling a plugin. And it's not easy, folks. It takes time, and you have to do the work. There's a lot of stuff out there that's like shortcuts, like how to be a millionaire on the web, and we all get lost in the MVP, most minimal viable product. And to put out a good product takes the time and the effort. Congrats on you on doing that, Andrew, and really working hard to do it. Where can folks find you on the web to say thanks?
Well, I'm still on Twitter. It's just at Norcross. I have my own site. It's just andrewnorcross.com. Because of Norcross, Georgia, it's very difficult for me to get any domains with Norcross in it. It is the largest suburb of Atlanta. They're very, very popular.
Did not know that.
Yeah, their high school sports teams are on ESPN. That's how I found out. So I have my company site, Reactive Studios, and Design Palette Pro is on its own site, and included there is a live demo that you can log in and see exactly how it works. You can walk yourself through to see, if it does something you need it to. It's genesisdesignpro.com, and beyond that, I'm not that far away. I'm home.
Awesome, awesome, Andrew. Thanks for taking the time. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.